they want to ban internal combustion engines, but we already know that they're saying, well, we're not going to have enough grid power to charge cars all the time, and we're going to have to suck power out of your car, perhaps during some grid crises. So maybe, we will use your car as a grid battery, or all these cars as grid batteries. Now, nobody's going to have a car. They don't want to have private cars out there. It's just that they're going to do it incrementally, and they're going to, isolate and target and destroy one sector after the other. They're coming after, hybrid cars as well. So the Biden administration wants 58 mile per gallon fuel efficiency standard by 2032. We're talking 9 years. And of course, there's a long lead time on designing cars. And there isn't going to be, the car companies see the handwriting on the wall. The car companies don't want to sell cars anymore. They want to rent cars by the ride. And so this is a way for them to ban cars. It just as they're, even at the same time, that they're banning and shutting down power supplies. This is the first time that's happened, and the Biden administration is doing that based on emissions. Eric Peters replied to this, and his take on it is, they just outlawed trucks. He said no law was passed, but the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration just decreed that by 2032, new vehicles must average at least 58 miles per gallon. No law passed. We have regulation without representation. We have banning of entire, classes of vehicles, confiscation of our freedoms and our essential transportation, our essential liberties, done without any representation. There's regulation without representation, and regulation without any Republicans having anything to say about it. But it's all going to be fixed if we get Trump in, so don't worry about it. We're all going to, show up at the Capitol at some point in the future, and we're going to shove him into office, and everything will be fine. Because all we need is that one guy who's going to miraculously fix everything. Republicans are just asleep at the wheel. No pun intended. Speaking of being asleep at the wheel, remember that situation? I think it was in Phoenix. It was in Arizona, where we had that self-driving Uber, and the woman was there, and they had a camera that was forward-looking, and they had a camera on her. She's sitting there playing with a phone or whatever, not paying any attention because she's bored to death. And then you got somebody who walks out of the shadows that's picked up by the forward-looking camera. There's a homeless person pushing a golf cart, jaywalking, walks right out in front of the car, and the car runs over her and kills her. And so all these people say, "Whoa, wait a minute, well, you can't really blame this car because it didn't see it coming." But they blame the woman who could not see it coming. And then after that was the narrative for a day or so, you had a lot of people who came out and said, well, the problem is that that car is not using visual, spectrum. It's using LiDAR to indicate, so it should have been able to see it even without any lights on at all. The lights are just there to make the person in the car feel comfortable. But the lights were not effective when this person was jaywalking across. Well, that person who was in the car as the backup safety driver has now just pled guilty to manslaughter. Again, that just comes across as a scapegoating to me. I don't think there was anything that she could have done about it. Even as a driver, if she was driving, I don't think she would have seen that in time. What was interesting about it, and the reason that, the Uber car didn't even slow down and ran over her, was because they had disconnected the emergency braking. They said it was too sensitive and it was giving all kinds of false sets. So they just disconnected the emergency braking. That's the way they respond to this kind of stuff. And of course, Uber from the very beginning said, we're hiring people right now to be drivers, but the reason that your ride is so expensive is because of that other dude in the car, and we're going to get rid of that person, and it's going to be self-driving. Well, they put a real wrinkle in that, but they're still moving in that direction. And as Eric Peters says, the only car right now that comes close to this new standard of 58 miles per gallon is a Toyota Prius, and it makes 57. 57. And of course, they don't want to have any hybrid cars. They are going to make sure that the hybrid cars are being purged. They want zero emission cars. So, no hybrid cars. You go back and you look at the Chevy Volt. That was driven strictly by electric generators. But you did have electric motors, I should say, but you did have a gasoline generator that was on board. And even though it had insanely low emissions, because that didn't have to run all the time, it would just top up the batteries. Even though it had insanely low emissions, many times if it was a short journey, you'd be able to make it on the battery. You wouldn't even have to engage that. But it was not a zero emission vehicle, so it can't be had. And to say that you're going to do this with a Prius, I mean, even a Prius that's a hybrid, 57 miles per gallon. And so why Eric Peters says they just banned trucks. He points out that the Ford F-150, not the electric version, but the regular one, has a curb weight of 4,465 pounds. He says its body is made out of aluminum, but it's got a steel frame onto which the aluminum body is bolted. That's how trucks are laid out, because it is the best layout for the type of work that people expect trucks to be able to do without breaking. You've got to have that steel frame there. A small car, like a Prius, has an integrated body and frame, unibody. This keeps the weight reduced. But even so, the Prius still weighs 3,100 pounds. He says it's a near miracle that something that heavy manages to almost comply with the federal regulatory apparatus decree for what's going to happen to cars. But it requires a hybrid drivetrain and a small car to almost get there. So he points out, it's not going to be there. Yeah, Biden is banning things left and right. It's just amazing. Every week we go, Biden is banning something else that we've taken for granted as some kind of tool or utility or convenience in our life. He's just taking everything from us bit by bit. You don't think they're going to get to the point where by 2030 you own nothing and you go nowhere, you do anything? It's happening right now before our eyes. Biden is doing this every week. What are the Republicans doing? Well, Jim Jordan's going to have a hearing about Facebook censoring people. Seriously. Something that we've known about for a decade. And he's going to have hearings about that. Not going to do anything about this stuff. He will do nothing about it. He'll do nothing about it. Just like the rest of these useless Republicans out there. They want you caught up in this stuff. Trump will do nothing about any of this stuff. He's not even talking about it either. He's talking about himself. The man is incapable of acting except out of his own perceived interests or out of revenge, as his lawyer, Ty Cobb, pointed out. The battery-operated version of the F-150, the F-150 Lightning, has a supposed 68 electronic miles per gallon rating, but it can only travel 240 miles on a full tank, a fully charged battery, in other words. And so for it to be that efficient, it would have to carry 3 times as much, whereas the F-150 says can travel more than 600 miles. So in order for the Lightning to be that efficient in terms of your range and your ability to do stuff, and of course, this is just talking about driving it. We've all talked about what happens to the battery charges on these things when you put them under load. They just watch it go straight down. He said it would need to carry 3 times as much electricity as its current 1,800-pound battery pack can store. The battery pack weighs almost as much as my entire car. It's amazing. That would increase the curb weight of this already 3.5-ton truck to more than 7,000 pounds. Which would not be very efficient. And of course, it isn't. And they don't really care about this. When you look at overall efficiency, they don't really care to do that. One of the interesting takes I saw from this, from the Daily Caller, which I thought was exactly wrong. The Biden administration seeks to raise the price of vehicles to force more people to drive EVs. That was their take on all this stuff. And it's like, no. As a matter of fact, if they keep raising the price of everything, we've already gotten to the point where people can't afford it. The purpose is to ban all cars. The purpose is to make them unaffordable, to make them unchargeable by shutting down the grid, or to just outright ban them. Since we've already got an infrastructure that works really well, you just can't use it. We're going to just ban that. The purpose is not to force people to buy EVs. The purpose is to make sure that nobody has a car. Daily Caller still does not get it. It's amazing to me. Got a lot of people out there who are now talking about the MacGuffin, the climate MacGuffin. They said, "Hey, look, it looks just like the pandemic MacGuffin." Well, of course, the pandemic MacGuffin looked like the climate MacGuffin before it. So now you've reverted back to type. Elon Musk, meanwhile, is looking to get a $100 million subsidy from government for charging stations. The king of crony capitalism. Once again, you're another one of these billionaires that conservatives put their hope in. According to emails reviewed by Bloomberg, Tesla is asking the government for $97 million to build 9 electric charging stations for its forthcoming electric semi-trucks. They're currently still in pilot stage. And so we want to move everything to trucks, and we want to have self-driving trucks. What could possibly go wrong with something that doesn't have a driver behind the wheel? We just talked about what happened with the Uber taxi. Well, now do that with something that weighs 80,000 pounds and is traveling at highway speeds. Last year, the California governor, Gavin Newsom, boasted that the Golden State had subsidized Tesla's success. And when the San Francisco Chronicle investigated the claim, it found that it had to the tune of $3.2 billion. Yeah, they're going to brag about that. And of course, Tesla is getting subsidies in Texas. Musk is getting subsidies for all these different businesses that he's moving to Texas now. California bragged about giving him money. SpaceX has now gotten $15.3 billion in government contracts. See, this is why you can't count on Elon Musk to stand in the gap to protect our free speech, because he's making too much money from this stuff. And that has been his business model, doing what the governments want. And not just the American government, bowing to the European government, bowing to China, all the rest of these things. When I remember the first time we talked, Eric Peters and I, we were talking about Elon Musk being the king of crony capitalism. At that point in time, the LA Times had also done an article about it, but Eric Peters did a better job than the LA Times. And he was at about $5 billion subsidy. Now just one of his companies is up to $15 billion, just SpaceX alone. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.